I don't feel any different. Is it okay if I sing a song?
If you want to entertain us, go ahead. Okay, but you'll only have a very small audience so far. There are two viewers. So.
Oh no, only two viewers there. It's probably my mother and one of my sisters.
Right, or maybe my wife.
Yeah, let me try to think of a good song I could sing. I was out at karaoke last night. I tried some new songs.
Oh, are you good at karaoke?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. People seem to enjoy me. But the nice thing about karaoke is when you find a place where you don't have to be particularly good, but the audience is always appreciative, and those are the good karaoke bars. This place I was at last night was pretty good that way.
Yeah, what was that?
A motorcycle driving down the street.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's always nice.
Now
Okay.
I hear a baby crying too.
So Johnny Axum says that it's you again. He says you're getting famous.
Good, I hope so. That's the point, right?
I
First you
think
get
that is
famous.
the point. Okay. I think that is the point. I think we're going to take away the promo and we're going to start up.
All right,
How's that?
let's see what I look like big.
Okay. Well, we're going to make us both look a little smaller, actually, and give some more of the background. That seems to work better over a period of time. Okay. Good evening, everybody. It is Tuesday night, and this is Joe Firestone in depth for real progressives. And my guest for tonight is Dimitri Cherny, who is running in the first congressional district in South Carolina for the Congress of the United States. And he is running in the Republican primary because primaries down there, okay, are completely open. So he figured out my chances are best if I run as a Republican. But make no mistake, folks, Dimitri Cherny Cherny, I should say, is extremely progressive. Just about the most progressive candidate you will meet on the trail this season. And we're going to find out how progressive he really is by going over the most imaginative platform that I have so far seen this year. So, I'd like to turn our meeting over for now to Dimitri, who will tell us about the platform. And first, I think we'll begin with a very short statement of the 5 issues that we all agree on. And plus 2 we have to deal with if we want a future. So, Dimitri, could you tell us what the 5 issues are?
Sure.
Okay, please go ahead.
I'm not seeing myself big on the screen there, Joe.
I can make you bigger. If you'd like me to make you bigger, I can certainly do that.
I still see the promo up there, but if it's looking good for you, then that's fine. I don't care.
Okay, the promo should not be up there, but what I'm going to do is put you solo on the screen right now.
Okay. Good.
Okay, and so according to my control area here, you are on the screen, and you have it alone.
All right, cool.
So please let us know what the 5 areas are that we agree on right now.
Yeah, so when I ran in 2016 for the same seat, the same district, I was the Democratic candidate, and I say I didn't do anything by the book. I didn't make phone calls. I didn't knock on doors. I didn't have anybody doing that on my behalf. But what I did instead was I rode my bicycle towing a little sailing canoe behind me through the 20 islands and peninsulas that make up the 1st Congressional District of South Carolina. This area we call the Low Country. And along the way, I stopped and parked the boat, and when it was on land, it was on wheels that I designed, so I took the wheels off, and it had a mast on it that laid across the top, so it had a banner on both sides that said Democratic candidate Cherny, blah blah blah, all this stuff. So it was extremely recognizable and hard to miss. And I would park in front of grocery stores and Walmarts and lumber stores and any place where regular, the public is gathering. And my campaigning style and campaigning is really just talking to people. My campaigning style is just wait for people to come up and talk to me. Look interesting enough and friendly enough, and an awful lot of people did. And so I got into some really good discussions, and I settled on it within a couple of weeks. I was actually out on the road for about exactly 80 days. I ended up doing exactly 1,000 miles, and I settled on a question a couple of weeks in, which was, what one or two things could the federal government or what one or two things could Washington do to make your life better? And as soon as I framed the question that way, nobody talked about the hot button issues that you see really both parties kind of talking about, at least all of the discussions, all the arguments between both sides of the aisle. What I saw instead was pretty consistently progressive issues, and I don't know if it's because the issues are progressive or it's just that people are all concerned about the same thing. But the number one response from everybody was healthcare. They want better healthcare. Everybody was very concerned about either going broke if they happen to come down with some disease, or dying if they happen to come down with some disease, and or they just didn't have health insurance, or they couldn't afford it, or whatever it was. So almost everybody, that was their first concern. And the people I talked to really ranged from all over the political spectrum. An awful lot of them were liberals, and they would come and go, oh, it's nice to see a fellow Democrat out here. And an awful lot of them were Republicans or conservatives or libertarians, and some of them even some guys kind of looked like me, middle-aged white guys, and started out with both guns blazing and slamming Obama and slamming Nancy Pelosi and really wanting to fight me. I mean, physically fight me in some cases. And I had to just mellow out and let them talk and let them work through it and ask that same question again. What one or two things can Washington do to make your life better? And even those guys came back with exactly the same answers. And they'd say, yeah, healthcare, or they'd tell me really sad stories about how they felt like their education really suffered, and then how they'd like to go back to school, but they can't afford to go back to school. An awful lot of people, especially the ones that were my age, were very concerned about Social Security, and people would say, I don't have any savings. I can't save anything because I'm living paycheck to paycheck. And so they don't know what they're going to do for their retirement. And then down in this congressional district, we have about 90,000 veterans, retired veterans down here. We had a Navy base. We still have a Air Force base up here. And so a lot of people get stationed here and like the area, and so they stay. And so an awful lot of people were very concerned about veteran benefits. So those were kind of the big four things: healthcare, education, Social Security, veterans benefits. And I'd say to people, we can't do any of those things until we get big money out of politics. And everybody would come back and say, yeah, Washington is corrupt. We need to get all the money out of there. So those were the 5 things I ended up settling on for my campaign in 2016. And this year I've just continued with the same things because they they resonate with everybody across the aisle, and it's been interesting even this year now that I'm running in the Republican primary, and I'm not running as a Republican, Joe. I'm running in the Republican primary,
Oh,
and
yes, I know.
yeah, and some of the Republicans that I've spoken to. In fact, I was interviewed by a couple of guys from one of the county parties around here to see whether I was a real Republican or whether I was a fake Republican. And I told them right up front, I said, I'm neither. I'm not a real Republican. I'm not a fake Republican. I'm not a Republican at all. I'm running in this race because this is the only way I can possibly win. And I told them exactly what I just told you, that a lot of people heard this for the first time, that we could actually have strengthened Social Security and universal health care, and they were like, wow, this is great. Why wouldn't we do this? So I thought, yes, if I can get in front of an audience that doesn't hear this, because I don't think Fox News is reporting on this stuff at all. So
Oh, no.
get in front of
Oh,
them,
no, they're not.
maybe a lot of them would actually end up voting for me too. So that's the plan. And then the other thing I added this year is really the two things that have been very compelling for me personally. And I was hoping I would have gotten into Congress in 2016, and then we'd have more time to work on these things. But time is really running out. I mean, really, for the whole planet, for civilization, the planet will survive. You know, all the animals and things. Yeah, some of them will die off, but the planet will survive no matter what happens with climate change. But civilization is not going to survive. You know, we're gonna end up not being able to support 7 billion people, and what's that going to do to civilization? I don't know. But we need to work on climate change, and especially down here in the first congressional district where I'm sitting right now. I think I'm in one of the high spots on this island. I live on an island outside of Charleston, which is a peninsula. This is actually a part of Charleston also. This is called James Island, and where I happen to live right here, I think I'm 12 feet above sea level, which is really high for most of these places. The average elevation above sea level for around here is like 6 feet. So it's quite possible that within 50 years, twice a day, most of this district will be underwater, uninhabitable, just because of rising oceans. And everybody around here
Right.
knows that. So that's a big concern. And fortunately, very few people push back on why it's happening, but they don't push back on that it is happening. So that's kind of nice. And then so that's my sixth one. And then my seventh issue is wealth and income inequality. And especially, I read Jared Diamond's book Collapse a number of years ago, and he goes,
Yeah, so did I.
what a fascinating story. I always liked him, his deep dive research into these things. But when he looked at a number of different civilizations over time, he found all of them eventually got to this end stage where the population is split between the elites and the commoners. And the elites are a tiny fraction of the people, and the commoners are many of us. And at some point, something devastating happens. Either they're attacked from some collapse, or what in the past has saved civilizations, or maybe not saved them, but the only reason the humans survive is that there's a huge die-off of people. There's a war that kills off a large percentage of the population, or there's a famine that kills off all or a lot of the people. I don't want that to happen, and it looks like we're definitely ripe for that. I could see with the income and wealth inequality that we have right now, nobody paying attention to climate change, and easily 50 years from now, civilization just collapsing. So I've been thinking a lot about these things now for since 2011, when I started driving trucks, and I had plenty of time to think. And
All right.
come up.
And okay, so the result of that is that you have arrived at a series of problems and solutions
Yeah.
that can handle the 7 things that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the main body of the platform. okay, that you have. So we're now kind of through the introduction, and I'd like you to begin going through the problems and the solutions, because that is the really imaginative part, okay, of what you have to offer, I think.
Yeah. Um, I don't remember them all off the top of my head, Joe. Do you happen to have my webpage pulled up there? But I mean, I can go through it.
I absolutely do have your webpage pulled up here, and I can cue you. The
All right.
first problem is rising seas, and your solution is the federal coastal property purchase program.
That's right. A lot of
The
P's in that.
CP3, you call it.
Yeah. CP3. Yeah.
Okay, so
And
tell us about CP3.
the idea is I want to make sure that nobody's off the rising seas. And I want to make sure that we do a graceful migration away from the seas rather than kind of thing that's going on in Syria, where there's a huge drought happening in the eastern part of the country, and so people migrated into the cities, and that caused all sorts of turmoil. This is going to be something that's going to be happening here all over the world for the next 100, 200, 300 years as people have to leave the coasts. There's a really kind of scary thing that most people don't consider. It's that when the oceans go up 10 feet from where they are right now, beaches will no longer exist around the world. The next generations won't know what a beach is. There will no longer be ocean beaches. There will be oceans colliding into what had been forest or what had been neighborhoods or something like that. Kids won't know in future generations what a sandy beach is like, because beaches take thousands of years to develop. So that's sort of a side issue that I kind of hit me once while I was down at the beach, that's happening that way. But what I want to make sure of is that people can gradually and gracefully move away from the coast, and we can dismantle all of our civilization on the shoreline so that, this is the way it's going to work. We have hurricanes down here every year. Last year we had, 3 or 4 that came through, 2 in quick succession, or I guess it was 3 in quick succession. And what's going to happen, guaranteed, is more and more houses will get destroyed every year because of. You still there? Yeah. Okay.
I'm here.
My screen just went dark, and I was wondering why. So, they're going to get destroyed from these storms. And when these homes are destroyed now, of course, there's a federal buyout program, FEMA, that happens. But we need something that's going to be better than that. We want to be proactive about it. And what we'd say to people is, if you are living within 3 feet of high tide right now, and you're in a flood area, and if a big storm comes through, and the storm surges for these hurricanes that come through here can be as much as 20 feet. It was a 30-foot storm surge that went through southern Mississippi with Katrina a number of years ago. 30 feet of water.
Yes, I remember.
So I mean, if that happened right here, where I am right now would be under 15 feet of water, and I'm in a high spot, and I'm actually just 200 yards from the water right here, one of the waterways, and these are tidal waterways around here. So what we'd say to people like right here is that if you're within this area and you want to have your place bought out, we'll buy it out. It's a federal program to buy these houses out. The catch is your money for the house will go to pay off your mortgage and things like that. Whatever the profit left over is going to be put into an escrow account that you can then use only somewhere that's more than 100 feet above sea level. So what it would do is, as people want to get away from the ocean, we don't have the same problem with other houses being built nearby and then them moving just 10 feet above sea level. They're actually going to move 100 feet above sea level. So the other part of the plan would be, we need to start rebuilding, or we need to start building new cities or enhance existing cities that are now more than 100 feet above sea level. And that would be part of the program, the federal program, where we'd go up and start putting in the infrastructure. And you could think of it as a jobs program if you want, but it'd be infrastructure to handle the millions of people that are going to migrate over the next few decades or next 100 or 200 years away from the oceans. And I see this as a huge opportunity for not just America, but for the entire planet to really rebuild our world the way we know we could make it. And with all of the urban planning that we know about now, don't make it a automobile-centric society in the future. We actually make this a walking society, and much more human scale. So I see that as a real opportunity for us. It's maybe making the best of a bad situation with rising seas.
Okay, so do I, and I think your points are very well taken. Let's move on to the second point in your platform, which is anthropogenic global climate change,
right?
To which the solution is a carbon-free economy.
Right. So the idea here is obviously that this is what's causing rising seas. This is what's causing increasing of temperatures overall. The scariest part about anthropogenic, I can't even say it now.
Yeah, I know.
Climate change is that eventually we'll get to the point where harvests won't come in, and areas where that are the bread baskets for America right now. I mean, for example, the Central Valley of California suffering through an extreme drought for the past few years. An awful lot of the products that were growing out there just can't be grown anymore. It's only going to get worse over time. And our economy is not really set up to move big industrial centers, especially farming centers, all over the country really quickly. To handle things. They're good at moving distribution, but they don't actually move farmers around. So we need to come up with some way to deal with that. But we also need to stop the problem from getting any worse. In fact, I just read today that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has now exceeded 410 parts per million. So it's never in our lifetime or any of our ancestors or our children's lifetimes will it ever go below 410 parts per million again. The last time it was even at 400 parts per million, the oceans were 300 or 30 feet higher than they are right now. So things are just getting worse. We're going to have to stop putting carbon into the atmosphere if we want to have a chance of getting away with just 100-foot sea rise. Instead of, if all of the ice caps melt, it'll be something like closer to 200 feet of sea rise, and try to plan all that is going to be really tough. So here's the thing: everybody's talking about carbon trading, and we need to let the free market do this. Well, it's just too damn late for that. Okay, we could have done that 30 years ago, and we could be where we have to be right now. But at this point, it's a crisis, and what we need to do instead is through regulations, federal regulations. We need to say, no more fossil fuels taken out of the ground. That's both natural gas and oil and tar sands, if you want. And what we're going to do instead is use nothing but biofuels. Now, biofuels could be made from algae, or it could be made from switchgrass. The idea would be we would use non-food biofuels, so that we're not going to have a huge disruption to the agricultural systems that are out there. And literally, if you go through the numbers on this, you could have farms in, that would fit in something smaller than the panhandle of Texas that could produce enough oil from algae every week to more than supply all the gasoline that we need, all the gasoline and all the diesel. And people say, well, why wouldn't you just switch to a whole electric economy, like the Tesla's doing, and a number of companies now are even coming out with big rigs that are all gasoline powered. But when I was driving trucks, this really came home to me. I'd go through about 200 gallons of fuel every day. And I was one of, 3 million trucks out there on the road. So we use an awful lot of fuel every single day. And when you actually count up all the BTUs that are contained in that fuel, I don't think there's a, I don't think it'd be enough battery manufacturing capability to do that. Not to mention, who knows what the side effects of battery manufacturing are. Let's just use algae. Let's just use oil. I mean, the oil that comes out of algae production is like a light, sweet Texas crude, and it will go right through our current refinery systems. It'll go right through all of our pipelines, and you just convert it into gasoline or diesel the way things are right now. So the oil industry probably could be more profitable because suddenly now they don't have to do offshore drilling. They don't have to do all these rigs. They don't have to get all these leased land areas. Basically, they're becoming farmers, or there are farmers that are raising the algae that then becomes the feedstock for the existing oil refinery industry. So I see that as the best solution we could do. And you could easily make it so that there's a 5-year changeover where we say at the end of these 5 years, every single drop of gasoline coming out of every single pump in the United States is actually made from bio oil instead of fossil fuels. And what that would do is make it so that we would have no additional carbon going to the atmosphere. We'd still be at 400 parts per million, but now we can do other things to reduce the carbon that's in the atmosphere over time. But at least we're not getting any worse. So it's like, what's the thing? The first thing you have to do is stop things from getting worse, and that's the only way I see.
Right, you have to. When you're in a hole, you got to stop digging.
Yeah, exactly.
What you're saying here, though, is that the burning of the biofuels are actually neutral. That
yes.
They are carbon neutral. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, so I mean, algae or any plant, when it's photosynthesis is taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and creating sugars or fats in this case out of that carbon dioxide. So if there was a oil producing industry around algae, and what's neat about this is every single one of the big oil companies has been experimenting with algae production and getting oil out of algae now for decades. And they know what the process is and they know exactly how to do it. They just haven't been forced into doing it. So, but anyway, so the algae would take the carbon dioxide out of the air. It gets converted into oil. The oil gets converted into gasoline or diesel. And when it gets burned, that carbon just goes back into the atmosphere again. So there's no additional carbon going in there because it's not being pulled out of the ground. It's just carbon dioxide that was being pulled out of the atmosphere maybe a week or two earlier. It may be that quick a cycle for production of the oil and the gasoline.
Okay, so that kind of thing is really very attractive. But one question, I would ask is, wouldn't we also want to shift over part of the production of power in our economy to that now is done by oil into the solar energy, and wind energy as well. And if we did that, then we would be reducing the carbon in the atmosphere. In other words, if we shifted from oil to that, insofar as we could make that shift,
right,
we would be reducing the amount, of carbon, and not just freezing the same amount in the air. Is that correct?
No, it isn't, because the only way you would reduce it, let's say we were completely carbon neutral with this whole bio oil that we're using. Yeah. And we were at 500 parts per million, which is probably where we'll be by 2025. 500 parts per million. And now what we're doing is we'd just be rotating that carbon in the atmosphere over and over. And even if we reduce the number of people that are driving cars that are running on bio oil, that 500 parts per million is not going anywhere. I mean, it does go through a seasonal fluctuation, And as the life comes up in the northern hemisphere, an awful lot of that carbon dioxide is taken in. And it may be, and nobody knows for sure, it may be that the planet cleans itself. It may be that we get enough green life out here that over time it does end up reducing itself down. But nobody's betting on that at this point. So the only thing we can do to get the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere is wait, or unless we come up with some technology that can suck it out of the atmosphere. But it's I don't think the cradle to cradle math on any kind of device like that would be very good. Even though there are a few companies out there trying it right now, but when you can plant trees or do something like that. It's like Mother Nature has already figured out this thing. How do you get carbon out of the atmosphere? So let's work with that.
Right, but if we were using more wind and more solar,
mm-hmm.
and not actually burning the algae
right.
Itself, then we wouldn't be going through that cycle, right? In other words, we'd be freezing the cycle.
Yeah, we'd be freezing it at 500 parts per million. I mean, if we got completely off of all oil-burning fuels or all carbon-burning fuels, the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that would be, let's say, is at 500 parts per million, it would stay there. We wouldn't make it any worse, but
it would stay there unless we were planting the trees to clean it out, right?
Something else that's going to do enough photosynthesis to actually clean that all out. Yeah.
So we would have to have a massive program,
reforestation, some sort. Yeah.
Yes, massive reforestation program to clean it out. But that's probably what we should do, right?
Yeah, probably. And what would be? Well, I don't want to even get into it. Yeah, okay, good. Yep.
Okay, so let's go a little further then with your platform.
Okay.
Okay. And the problem is we have an economic system which is trickle-up economics, and your solution to that is local community mutual funds.
Yeah.
A very interesting solution.
Yeah.
But tell us about that, please.
This was an idea I came up with again while I was driving trucks. I was doing containers out of the ports here in Charleston, and I drive out about 300 miles. There are a lot of small towns, relatively small towns around the southeast that still have manufacturing, and so I would end up driving into these towns, and when I look at them, they all seem to have had their heyday about the same time, which seemed to be like the Eisenhower administration in the late 50s or so. The architecture was all kind of the same, and it all looked like Mayberry. But all of these downtown areas that were really cute were all mostly boarded up. And all of the business had moved out of the downtown area to just the main roads coming into all of these little towns. And on those main roads, there's an AutoZone, there's a McDonald's, there's a Kentucky Fried Chicken, there's a Walmart, there's every restaurant you see everywhere. And in fact, having been a truck driver, I can tell you every city in America, every small city in America, and even big ones, all look alike because we have exactly the same businesses everywhere. It's like local businesses have pretty much gone away. It seems, at least on these main drags coming in. So I began to think, what was different about it in the 50s and the 60s that there was more money to be invested locally? And when you look back on it, it's that back then there were just a handful of major businesses in the town. There was a grocery, there was a lumber store, there was a hardware store, there was a bank, clothing store, things like that. And they were all owned locally by local people. And the dollars that they would collect, the profit that they would make, they would recirculate back into the same community. So all of those dollars were recirculating all the time, and very few of them were actually leaving the community. But today it's the exact opposite. because whoever owns the hardware store, it's probably a nationalized hardware store. Whoever owns the lumber store, it's probably Lowe's or Home Depot. The banks are all nationalized. So they're the local owners that would have recycled all those profits aren't there anymore. Now the profits for all of these businesses are going other places, to other towns, and they're going into other people's bank accounts. So these towns have slowly been bled dry. And unless they have state colleges or state hospitals or something like that, or prisons, an awful lot of people are vying for prisons now, because that's where they get state money that's coming in from outside, that's paying local people who can then support the local economy. But other than that, there is no good recycling of dollars inside of there. And yet, what I found was, driving through all of these towns, there are still many big old mansions and some really nice houses that are well maintained. And it seems like there's probably quite a bit of wealth still there. It's just not being used locally. So how would you incent people to bring those dollars back? Because they probably have millions of dollars in Wall Street, in their retirement funds, in their 401ks. How would you give incentive to these people? Well, you create this idea called a local community mutual fund. You give them a tax break on it, something like, maybe it's all the profits that you would get from this thing are tax-free, or we give them some other a great deal where we can say you can take X percentage of your 401k and shift it out of these wherever these places were that you have it right now, into the local community mutual funds. And it would only be for local people. And so it had to be in a specific geographic area. So, for example, I did a back of the napkin calculation for Charleston, the Charleston area here. And we could probably easily get billions of dollars, probably $8 billion into a local community mutual fund that would just be what we call the tri-county area around here. Then those dollars would be handed out in three ways: equity investments, debt investments, and as grants. And as members that have put dollars into the local community mutual fund, we would have people apply to us for grants or equity investments or loans, and we would have a choice to vote on where we wanted the dollars to go. It'd be very much like GoFundMe, but you're a member of the local community mutual fund, so you now have some number of votes depending on how much money you put into the thing. And maybe it's on just a rolling basis. People are applying to get grants or to get investments of one way or another. What I see this really doing is bringing the dollars back into the community, but more than that, it would give incentive to local adults, but mostly local kids, to become entrepreneurs. And kids are, the ones that are going to come up with the good ideas. So they would. We would have the opportunity to teach kids in high school and in college how to, where you can help and you can start a business and do things. And I think that every kid that gets out of high school knows how to run a company, how to do finances, how to write a business plan, they know how to do marketing, how to do supply chain, things like that. And I could see easily every year hundreds of applications from kids coming out of high school, or maybe they're still in high school, these businesses. We're throwing money all over the place for these kids to run these businesses. Maybe it's $50,000, maybe it's $100,000 per one of these, for every one of these things. And more times than not, these businesses will fail. But where'd the $100,000 go? It just went into the local community, and it probably went into all the local shopkeepers and stuff. And as long as we can get people to not buy at stores that are putting their dollars outside of the community, all those dollars are essentially recycling back in again. And I'd see that over time, over a few decades, this could be a huge entrepreneurial boon to every one of these little communities that's out there in the sticks somewhere, that's in the middle of nowhere, that doesn't have anything going on. And maybe the people that have been putting their money into Wall Street and no longer in their towns, would decide, I want to actually have it here in my town because I like this town. This is where I grew up. This is where my friends are. This is where my family is. And this town isn't falling apart anymore. It's really cute. It has all these great shops and things. So that's like from an entrepreneurial point of view. The other part of it is, it's kind of along the lines of the job guarantee, which I think is another one of my items on there. But
It is.
We would make it so that we could give grants out to people that are doing good work in the community. That is nonprofit or whatever. But this is what I told Joy the other day. I have a friend who is just excellent at working with high school kids in keeping them out of trouble. And he had gotten out of high school, got into selling drugs, ended up going to prison, and has turned his life around. And he's just a big, sweet guy and knows how to talk to these kids to keep them out of trouble. I would love to give him a grant, $50,000, $60,000, maybe $100,000 a year, so that he can spend all of his time going to these high schools and talking to these kids, because that's going to be more benefit to our community than anything else he could do. What's he doing instead? He's now a lineman for the telephone company or something like that. Well, you can get anybody to do that, but his talent is in talking to these kids and keeping them out of trouble. So yeah, part of the local community mutual fund would be my friend, I'll do a little shout out here, Smurf, Papa Smurf. Papa Smurf would apply with a grant, and we would say, yeah, we're going to give you a grant to do this. And there's no strings attached. He does it. Everybody knows him. And we just keep them doing that. So that's what the local community mutual funds can do. They can keep all sorts of communities alive and bring them back to life from the near-death experience that's happening out here. God, especially out here in the sticks of America. And as I said, when I was driving trucks, I went through an awful lot of these towns that are just dying. This could be a way to bring them all back.
Okay, I think that is a great idea and bears a lot more discussion, but not for tonight, because we have to move on to the next problem, which is corporations behave badly. And so what are we going to do about that? Yes, corporations do behave badly, and you have some great ideas for stopping that.
Yeah, so there's this concept of B Corps, benefit corporations. And benefit corps are an idea that a corporation should not be just responsible to their stockholders, and they should not be only interested in making profits, but they should also be interested in profits, people, and the place that they're in, their community, and the planet. So really a quadruple bottom line. And so benefit corporations put basically words in their formation documents that say exactly that. And there's an evaluating organization that will evaluate B Corps based on a number of criteria to see whether they are a fully sustainable company, and see how their supply chains are, whether the supply chains are sustainable, and whether their waste stream is sustainable, and a lot of things, and whether they're working well with the communities or not. I'd like to do something very similar to that, except make it tied to federal taxes. So basically, a corporation that is extremely sustainable, is doing everything right. They have no waste stream. Their supplies and their sources for all their materials are coming from entirely renewable or even restorative processes. Basically, a company that's doing everything right, we absolutely minimize their federal taxes. Because you need to think about it. Since we know about MMT, we don't need their tax dollars to fund things. What we need taxes to do is give people incentive to do the right thing. So if there is a corporation that's doing the right thing, well, then why do we need their money? They're doing the right thing. Let's not penalize them by having them pay a lot of taxes. Let's reduce their taxes to the absolute minimum. Let's say maybe it's 10% or something like that. For corporations doing the opposite of that, for example, ExxonMobil or any of the oil companies, we raise their taxes to phenomenal levels, because right now we know their supply chain is destroying the damn planet, and we know their waste stream is destroying the damn planet, and everything that they're doing is destroying the damn planet. So fine, we raise the taxes on all these corporations, and watch how quickly the investors in ExxonMobil will then demand that their company gets out of the fossil fuel business and goes to the biofuel business, which suddenly reduces the tax burden on the company down to something reasonable. Now, you can't, as a fuel company, be entirely 100% sustainable, but you could be a lot better. It reduces their tax burden, and then suddenly investors get their dividend checks again at the end of the year, and the value of the company goes up. So I came up with this idea long before I came up with the idea that we just need to switch, damn it, from fossil fuels to biofuels. This was sort of like we could do this over a certain amount of time, specifically for oil companies. But this is a great idea for all companies. And it would require, of course, some sort of evaluation process to look at companies and see whether they are sustainable or not, whether they are their employees right, whether they are like that. Is to use federal taxes on a corporate basis as the incentive or the disincentive for corporations to behave correctly. And behave correctly is against this criteria. To ensure that whatever people are doing will long-term survival and continuation and advance society. And so when you look at company actions that aren't working, those are the companies that we should be taxing. That's what taxes should do. They're a penalty. And so when you're doing bad things in your company, and when you're doing bad things personally, we should be taxing you heavily, so that if you're destroying the planet, if you're making it so that future generations are not going to be able to survive, then you're going to pay for that with taxes. And that's what taxes should be.
Okay, so at this point, I have only one thing to say. Shame on you, Dimitri. Those are very non-Republican ideas. Okay, the next problem, okay, since, now you talked about, local community mutual funds, okay, and corporations behaving badly, and some ideas that might actually bring very substantial profits to corporations due to the tax incentives, okay, and things like that.
Yeah.
Then, of course, some people are going to raise the issue, well, what about inequality? What's going to happen, okay, with inequality? So your next problem is greed is destroying civilization, and your solution is greed management.
That's right.
So please tell us about that, Dimitri.
The idea is that how do we ever get the concept that some people's effort can be hundreds or thousands of times more valuable to society towards our goals of making sure that civilization exists in the future, because that should be our society's goal. How do we ever get the idea that somebody should be paid hundreds, thousand times more for the effort that they're putting in? Frankly, it's not possible. When you talk to people, you say, could you possibly do something, or could anybody possibly do something that would be worth 100 times more than the value the guy who's scrubbing the toilets is giving to our society? And people generally go, no, not really. You really can't. I mean, even you look at people who like Steve Jobs, who created Apple, but still on an annual basis, is he worth 100 times more than the guy who was scrubbing the toilets there at Apple? So I say, let's just put a stake in the ground. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, 100 to 1 should be the ratio that people can take money home after whatever they earn. And the example I like to use is basketball players. I like to pick on LeBron James. I don't know, he seems like a really nice guy, but LeBron James, I don't know what he's earning now. Let's say it's $20 million a year. Under this program, if the highest amount of dollars you can take home is 100 times what the lowest paid person in the United States would earn. The lowest paid person in the United States at $7.25 minimum wage would make about $15,000 a year, 40 hours a week. Well, then in that case, LeBron James could take home 100 times what that guy making $7.25 an hour would take home. That would be $1.5 million a year. So LeBron James would be earning $20 million a year, but he would have taxes that would only allow him to take home $1.5 million a year. Now, there are a lot of millionaires out there that would go, oh, I can't live on $1.5 million a year. You know, my monthly expenses are higher than that. Well, fine then. Raise the minimum wage to, let's say, $15 an hour. And now those people are going to be earning $30,000 a year. And now you can take home $3 million a year. Is that enough for you or not? And the other thing that this, of course, does is it gets away from that whole argument that, if we raise the minimum wage, then the prices on everything are going to go up. Well, probably not, because the CEOs at the top of the companies now aren't going to be making any more than the people at the bottom. They're only making 100 times that. So it's kind of a fairly equitable way to do it. The big goal for me is our society right now is so driven by millionaires and billionaires and everybody's quest to become rich. And something like 40% of the kids that go to the Ivy League schools come out and go to the finance industry. So we've got arguably the best minds in the country or in the world going into the finance industry only because they can make the most amount of money in the finance industry. Why wouldn't we make it so that kids would know they can't make a killing in any industry? Everybody can only make the maximum take-home pay, say $1.5, $3 million a year, and that's it. What would it do to the incentive for the next generations, where they'd go, I'm not going to go into finance because I know I can't make any more in finance than I can make doing something else. And the other thing this would do is, going back to the example of the basketball players, imagine what it would do to the NBA if suddenly now all of the payrolls for all of these guys could get greatly reduced. LeBron James is taking home $1.5 million a year, so maybe the total tax rate for him average would be 50%. So he would actually earn $3 million instead of $20 million. So they would actually pay him $3 million, so he'd still take home his $1.5 million. And now the company has $17 million left over that they don't even know what to do with. So what would people do? I mean, it's not going to go to the owners because they're in exactly the same situation as LeBron. It's not going to go to the investors because they're in exactly the same situation as LeBron. Everybody's in the same situation where they can't take home all this money anymore. So what are they going to do? They're just going to pay it off in taxes instead. What they'll do instead is they'll reduce ticket prices.
Yay!
So, yeah, exactly. So instead of $150 to go watch LeBron James play, now it only costs $15. And more than that, now instead of an NBA franchise costing $1 billion in these major cities, you can have lots of NBA franchises all over the country that would be, so much less expensive because the players don't have to be paid so much anymore. And now instead of there being, I don't know what the number is, let's say there's 500 NBA players right now, maybe there'd be 5,000 NBA players. So all of these kids that had always had hopes all their lives that they could get into the NBA, they finally could get into the NBA. And the competition would be much more interesting because there'd be more people out there going in with this thing. And the NBA example is just one example. The same thing would happen for every single industry, everything that's going on out there. So it could be a huge change for us. And mostly, I think, what I'm excited about is what it would do to the psyche of kids growing up in America that wouldn't have to always be thinking about becoming multimillionaires because everybody can get to a certain level. You get to your maximum level and then that's it. That's all you can do. So,
what a boom it would it would be wonderful. It really would.
It would, yeah.
Okay, so the next problem: unemployment ruins lives. Solution: the American Jobs Program.
Oh, that's just crazy. How can we pay for that?
I have no idea.
So basically, this is a job guarantee program. The thing that I go into differently on this than anything I've seen before is, again, I'm coming at it from an entrepreneurial perspective because I've started 3 companies, and I'm an inventor, and I have a patent on this airborne wind energy system and stuff, and so I always look at it from that perspective because in my life I've had more fun working for myself, and it's so much easier to get out of bed when you're doing something. Well, number one, I'm finding the whole Congress thing is even better than being an entrepreneur because I'm working for other people. I'm trying to make other people's lives better. That's the easiest thing for me to ever get out of bed is when I'm helping other people and improving their lives. But when I was an entrepreneur, you're always excited and you're always working, and your life has meaning, instead of just going to a boring job. And even the most interesting jobs, as I experienced this year, as soon as I was out the door and I wasn't getting a paycheck anymore, my interest in that company just went away. And I think everybody's kind of the same way. Everybody's kind of coin operated to some point where you need to have good pay to do these things. So here's my plan. Again, it would go back to like the local community mutual fund where people are looking for grants. We would allow people to come up with ideas for businesses that would be businesses that the private industry would never want to get into because they're not profitable. And Pavlina goes through a whole list of all of these things, everybody else does, that exactly are all of these things that couldn't be profitable, but they never quite specified who would run the program. What I'm saying in this case is make it, again, an entrepreneurial program where somebody says, okay, I'm going to start this renewables, for example. Renewables are recycling renewables is never profitable. Everybody keeps trying it, but they just can't do it. So we'd say, I'm going to start a renewables company here in Charleston, and I'm going to employ 10 people, and it's going to cost me this amount of money, and they make this application to the job guarantee program. And we look at their application, we look at their business plan, and we go, okay, good. We're going to give you funding for 2 years of this thing, and we're going to see how you do along the way. And the same thing could happen for lots of jobs. Maybe it's childcare jobs. It's all the jobs everybody's always talked about doing it, but the difference is it won't be administered by the government. It'll be paid for. It's like single payer medicals. Where we're just paying the dollars out. Other people are actually running it on an entrepreneurial basis. So I think that would be the big difference, and I think that could be very powerful, again, especially for kids coming out of school, and we would have the same incentive to teach these kids how to run businesses, how to do business plans, all of that, how to be little entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that has been talked about actually by Pavlina to some degree. Okay, and about some of the things she has written. She likes the idea of social ventures. Also, Neil Wilson, okay, has written a good deal about that. Okay, and I've talked a lot about that in some of the videos, okay, that I've done. Good. And have tried also to imagine the various things that people could do. But I see that as a very big part of the job guarantee program. I think, though, you've added some new perspectives here because of your experience as an inventor, okay, and as an entrepreneur, and as somebody who started some companies. I've also started some companies as well. One has to have kind of an experience like that to imagine what is possible within the job guarantee program in the area of creating basically nonprofit social value ventures that are not something that the profit-making businesses would ever take a risk on.
Yep,
okay?
Exactly.
Not something they could fund.
Yep.
Okay, so the next area, ignorance breeds fear. Fear breeds hate.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a solution for that, which is really a great solution. So please tell us.
I just don't know how we'd pay for it, Joe.
Okay, let's take care of that then, but very quickly because we haven't really taken care of that yet. So let's take care of it, actually, very quickly. So here's what we say when people ask us, how are you going to pay for it? Here's the short answer. I put it up on screen, but solo. And what we say is, we're Congress. We'll just order the Fed to give Treasury the money. And that solution is called overt congressional financing. And that's the briefest statement of that I've been able to formulate so far. Okay, I'll take it away now, though, and I'll point out that I have the legislative language for that, or an approximation to the legislative language here. And I'm not going to read that out, but after we're through talking, I'm going to send that to you so you have that in your back pocket just in case you need it. But it's basically two sentences. The first sentence says basically, give the Treasury enough money to pay for the current appropriations that we're ordering them to spend, that we're mandating them to spend. And the second sentence says, give Treasury enough money to pay for the debt subject to the limit that is falling due during the period of the appropriation. Yeah. So the debt can be paid off without us having to actually issue more debt instruments. Now, of course, we all know here that there's no problem with issuing debt instruments from the financial point of view. I mean, we know that, okay? It's not really necessary to do that. But from the political point of view, then we have to contend with a Megan McArdle, or when we have to contend with a Pete Peterson. We don't have to contend with him anymore because he, sadly passed on recently. Yes. But his son, Michael, is still there. The foundation is still there. The network is still there. The terrorism over the debt, is still there. And this gets rid of the terrorism over the debt, this second sentence. Yeah. And the reason why it does that is because we have so much short-term debt and other kinds of debt falling due over 6 months that we would probably pay off roughly $4 trillion within 6 months' time of the national debt. And we could point to that and say, whenever they spoke about the debt again, the debt, we just point out, hey, we just paid off $4 trillion of that in 6 months. Yep. And this way, we're going to get rid of all of it over a period of time. So what is it? It's a non-problem. You've been lying to us for all these years about a non-problem. How do we know it's a non-problem? Because we got rid of it in a sentence. Right. That's why.
I use the argument, just to go on an aside and follow this down a little bit. I use the argument that because the guy I'm going up against, Mark Sanford, is a Freedom Caucus guy, and his biggest issues are the debt and the deficit. And in fact, I think I said to him in a debate I did in 2016 with him, and I will definitely say it again. I have another debate with him coming up in a couple of weeks. I said, so when is it the size of the debt is going to be the big problem? Because is it like when it's 10 times bigger than it is now? I say, well, 25 years ago, it was 1/10 the size that it is right now, and now it's 10 times bigger. And where's the problem? Maybe it'll be when it's 1,000 times bigger, because when Roosevelt started in office, the debt at that point was 1/1000th of what it is right now. So are things worse now, or are they better because the debt is 1,000 times bigger? So that's a good way to argue.
Okay, I certainly think that's a good way to argument. To argue that, and that it's a pretty good answer. Yeah. But I don't think it's as compelling as saying, we're the Congress. Yeah. We'll just tell the Federal Reserve to pay for it. And then let's see what he does with that. I mean, I know what he's going to do with that. he's going to think for a minute. He's going to be stunned first, okay, and then he's going to think about it, okay, and then he's going to say, well, you're just printing the money. That's going to create runaway inflation, Weimar, Zimbabwe, and stuff. And then you'll have to explain very patiently why it's not going to create any runaway inflation, which actually is pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it. Okay, but anyway, I suppose the first thing to say to that anyway, so wait a minute. So you're not saying the problem is that we're going to run that we're going to run out of money. That in other words, you're granting then, Mark, that we don't have a solvency problem because we can order the Federal Reserve to pay for it whenever we want them to, and to pay down the national debt too, whenever we want. So you're agreeing that we don't have a solvency problem, right?
Yeah.
You're saying the real problem is inflation, right?
Yeah.
All right. Now let's argue about inflation.
Yeah. Good.
How about that, buddy? Forget about solvency. Okay. And Warren, by the way, had an article he wrote in the, I think it was in HuffPost. I'm sure it was in HuffPost, but it was in 2010, it came in 2011. And he made exactly this point. He said, hey, there's no solvency problem here. There might be an inflation problem if you want to argue about that. You know, let's argue about that. But he basically took the same tack then, and I agree with that tack. I think every time we've had to argue with those people, when we talk about something like employment, an employment problem, as opposed to the inflation problem, we win. They only started to win when they began to talk about the solvency problem. But we beat them all through the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and through the early part of the 70s until they started talking about the solvency problem. So if we can dismiss that, we can beat them again, and for the same reason.
Good.
But
good point.
To go back to your platform.
So now that I know how I'll pay for this thing, my idea is, when I looked at my own life, when I first started traveling, both nationally and then internationally, especially. my first international trip was to Montevideo, Uruguay, and I was
wonderful place, huh?
20 years old, and I actually was going down to just hand carry some circuit boards down for a little company I was working for, and ended up spending I think 2 nights there. And I when I thought of 21-year-old kid raised in America, I thought of Uruguay. I thought people would be living in dirt floored huts or something. And here I'm walking around in Montevideo, and it was a fantastic cosmopolitan city. And there were I was a real car nut back then, and there were cars that I had never seen that were much cooler than any cars that were in America at the time. And I was just blown away. I was like, I can't believe the rest of the world is this civilized, this interesting, this beautiful, and that started decades of international travel for me. And so I've been an awful lot of places and had nothing but good experiences everywhere I've gone. And I can't help but think that everybody else could benefit from that also. And I think one of the things that international travel does, at least if you get out of the cruise ship and get out and talk with locals, is that you get an appreciation for other lifestyles and other ways of living. And even as an engineer, I look at individual things like door handles are so much different, and the way doors close in Europe or Northern Europe compared to Southern Europe and things like that. It's like, just because we're doing things a certain way here in America doesn't mean it's the right way to do them. There are other ways to do things. And I think everyone could benefit from that and from meeting people that aren't anything like themselves. So my idea is to require that every single public school student in America travels. And we would have a traveling program basically where kids would be out traveling all the time. And first they would go to other places in their states, maybe when they're in middle school. But when they get into high school, they'd actually go on some sort of exchange program with other high schools and other kids in other parts of the United States, and maybe in Canada, and maybe in Mexico too. But then we expand the program even more than that the last 2 years, where we would have kids going off to other countries all over the place. And it could be an exchange program with other kids from other countries coming over here, or maybe not. Um, but the idea would be that instead of kids being inwardly focused on what's going on in their communities only, they're suddenly focused on what's going on in the entire world. And because we'd make it so that when a kid is going to go out to, let's say, Zimbabwe for his 2 week exchange program or his 2 week program out in somewhere else, he starts communicating with the people that he's going to be going to school with or living with out there long before via social media. And so you suddenly had this international communication network going on between, I don't know, I've forgotten now what the number of high schoolers there are in America, but it's many millions of high schoolers would suddenly be our ambassadors for the entire world with kids their age. And we would have so much communication going on. And then, of course, when they go out there and they meet and they realize that eating different kinds of foods is not bad and some of it's delicious, there's this huge international exchange of information going on between next generations. Us old people, it's over for us. We don't care. But the next generations, the next generations just could be so much better. They could be so much more open. And, I really came up with this idea here in Charleston. We had what would they call the Emmanuel 9 murders a few years ago. And it's a local, well, not a local, I guess he's upstate South Carolina, a young man, white kid, who was just extremely racist and raised in a racist household with Confederate flags and thinking that black people are less than him. And he ended up sitting in this church and killing 9 people at the end of the church Bible study class.
Oh my God.
How could you possibly make it so that kids wouldn't have that hatred, and so that even if their parents were still racist Confederates, this kid would come back from his international travels and go, Mom and Dad, I've been around the world and I've met people that are completely different than me, and they may look different and they may even think different, but they're still good people. And no, we're not better than anybody else. So I think that's what this program could do, where it would just promote a whole new wave of peace around the planet. I mean, it's going to take a couple of generations to get to that point, but I think you'd probably see results within a few years. I mean, the kids coming out of high school that had gone through this already and coming into college and getting out into the world, I think we'd see a huge social shift so quickly. And I think it could really make things a lot better.
Yeah, so do I. I think it would be a cultural change for us that would be very important. Yeah. And it would start to prepare us for the day when we really could be global citizens.
Yeah, that's the idea.
I think it's a very important idea. So the next problem, millions of Americans are struggling to survive on starvation wages. And then your solution is to provide a living wage to everyone who works any job.
Yep, and I mean, this is just basically raising the minimum wage. And I think, as you know, as we all know, if you did a job guarantee program correctly, you wouldn't even have to set a minimum wage as long as the job guarantee program has a competing wage that is providing a living wage. Then everybody else would have to. All the other businesses would have to provide something equivalent to that. But the bottom line is, we just need to increase that minimum wage. And again, coupled with my other plan for the 100 to 1, this would work hand in hand with that.
Yes, it would. Absolutely. Okay, and the next one is about our guns problem. That our death rate due to gun violence is the highest in the developed world. And your solution is sensible gun laws. So please tell us what you think the sensible gun laws could be.
I thought about this from the perspective of, I have people that I would trust with anti-tank missiles, you know, and um, the question isn't what the particular weapon is so much as it is who is safe and who is sane enough to carry a gun. And lately, I've sort of added another twist to this with that maybe it would require a village, and somebody else called it a militia. You have a militia of people that determine who is safe and sane, and if you want to join the militia, then they determine whether you're safe or sane, and then you can have a gun. But that's not the important thing. The important thing is how do we get guns off the street so that gangbangers and angry boys can't just go out and buy a Saturday night special somewhere because they can't afford them. And the way we would do that is we would have to raise the price of guns on the black market. And the only way you can do that is by stopping the supply of, or slowing the supply of guns to the black market. And the only way you can do that is by requiring that people have gun safes in their homes. And on the other side, we introduce a national gun buyback program. And gun buyback programs have never been done nationally, but they've been done locally. And every time they're done locally, people are shocked by the number of guns and the variety of guns that people will turn in for. I think Los Angeles did this for, it was a $50 or $100 grocery card. And they were getting in guns that were, many hundreds of dollars worth of guns and thousands of these guns in. So if we did a national gun buyback program correctly, we could probably take an awful lot of guns, probably maybe half of the guns, 150 million guns out of society. Now, what that would do is make it so that suddenly there'd be a great incentive for burglaries and to burglarize houses that are known to have guns and to get all these guns back out there again. So what we have to do is require that everyone that has guns, that legally owns guns right now, would have to have their guns in a safe. And if you reported that your guns were stolen and it was determined that they weren't in a safe, well, then you're fined or you're penalized in one way or another. But eventually, with the gun buyback program and with guns being in safes, the gun supply out on the street would reduce, therefore driving the price of those guns up and probably putting them outside the reach of most young kids that just are angry and need to do things with them. So that's kind of the idea, using essentially the free market and through relatively minor controls, reducing the number of guns that are out there.
Okay, well, that's certainly a sensible approach, but as you say, it's a gradualist approach. And so for years, we would probably still have very high rates of gun violence going on. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I simply, point that out.
Yep.
Okay, I also point out that the arguments that say that it's not really going to help to take away the guns simply goes against the experience of other countries. Yeah. Australia, I suppose, is the outstanding example, okay, because there they had a death rate from guns that was fairly high, and they took away the guns in the early 90s, and that completely reversed the whole situation. So the fact that people did not have access to guns really did make a difference in reducing the fatality rate, and a very drastic difference. And so even if we pass the kinds of gun laws, okay, you're advocating for here, which are certainly sensible and would certainly help the situation, we perhaps should also keep trying to simply get rid of the guns so we speed up the process.
Yeah, but I there's no way you can actually take people's guns away. I mean, if you know, I have a lot of gun nut friends on both sides of the political spectrum. Some liberal gun nuts and some very conservative gun nuts. And if you try to take their guns away, whoever that poor bastard is that's trying to take those guns away is gonna get shot. So I mean, people that like their guns really like their guns, and they're willing in many cases to die for that like of guns. So if you didn't want to have a whole lot of violence happening out here, it's just not feasible to do that. So you voluntarily, I mean, people want to have turn in some of their guns, and you know, it's something like 25% of Americans own guns. So that's 75 million people out here, and something like only 4 million people own half of the guns. 4 million people own like 150 million guns. So there are some gun nuts that each own 30 or 40 guns. I a few years ago, I owned a rifle, and I took the NRA rifle course. And in fact, I think I'm definitely still on the NRA mailing list. I may still be listed as a member. Who knows if they take people off or not? But I took the NRA rifle safety course, and my instructors were all gun nuts. And the last day of the class, they all brought their guns in. So I got to shoot AK-47 and an AR-15 and an old M16, an elephant gun, every type of shotgun there is out there, all sorts of rifles. So it was pretty fun. But I mean, these NRA gun instructors are fun people, but they don't want you to take their guns away. They're not going to give them up willingly. And I think for the most part, they were very safety conscious. So they were safe and sane, and that's the important thing. And if we can make sure that it's only safe and sane people that are owning guns, I'm okay with that.
And I suspect that would reduce the death rate considerably.
Yeah.
And make the problem far less serious as a problem. Okay, and you end off your platform with 3 problems. 1, civilization is vulnerable to complete destruction. Well, I think that's true. And 2, we need to end endless war. And 3, do we just go to work, pay bills, and then die? Okay, and then you've got have a solution for those 3 problems. So please tell us about the problems and the solution.
Yeah. So I grew up in the 60s. I was born in 1960, and for any of us that grew up in the 60s and watching the NASA space program, the moon landings, and even Skylab after that, it was awfully exciting, and it seemed like so many of us that are my age now, 57, and a little older, were so excited about that, and we all felt like this was our destiny. The civilization's destiny was to get out to the stars, and an awful lot of us are science fiction fans because of that. And but it's sort of a realistic science fiction fans in the thinking that it's not Star Wars science fiction where who knows where the technology is coming from and all of this stuff, but we actually had plans to get out there. And I think that civilizational goal of leaving planet Earth, and not everybody. I don't want to leave planet Earth. I did when I was younger, but I don't want to leave it now. I really like this planet. But there are a lot of people that want to go explore other places. How many thousands of people are volunteering for one-way tickets to go to Mars? It was something like 10,000 people or something like that volunteered as a one-way ticket to go to Mars and then die up there after a few years. So a lot of us feel like there has to be some migration off of this planet. And I think that's a worthy goal. I mean, we are travelers as a species. We make journeys. We like to explore edges. Not everybody, but enough of us do that we have led civilization. So we need to continue moving off the planet. So that's one thing as a civilizational goal that we can all point to and say, yeah, this is sort of the pinnacle of our civilization, that we're also journeying out there somewhere. So that's one thing. The second is there is a risk of destruction from asteroids or large meteors or something like that coming and hitting the planet. And even though NASA does have a watch program for this, if you still watch the NASA news, it seems like every couple of weeks they go, whoa, didn't see that one. And some big asteroid goes by and they say, yeah, it was between us and the moon, and we didn't see it until it was a few hours out. So we have no way to protect against those things. And, you know, there have been a number of movies about this. What's that Bruce Willis movie from some years ago where...
Yes, Armageddon.
Yeah, and apparently there were two specialized space shuttles that were all prepared to go and put this nuke out there. We don't have that. We don't have anything like that. We have no way to protect against one of these planet killers coming in. And if you look at what actually happened when the dinosaurs were killed, it was a relatively small rock. It was like 6 miles long, so it's the size of Manhattan. But if you think about it, when the bottom end of that asteroid was hitting the ground, the top end was outside of the atmosphere. And they know now that what actually killed the dinosaurs happened in about 2 hours. Basically, the sky was on fire. There was hot debris falling down everywhere, and everything that wasn't either underwater or underground died within hours of that asteroid hitting off the Yucatan Peninsula. So I don't want that to happen again, and we certainly have the technology to protect against that. So what we need to kind of get it all going again. And the third problem is we seem to be in endless war. So if excuse me, if we ever got to the position where we're not right now, where threat levels around the world decrease, how would we actually redeploy all of we're spending nearly $1 trillion a year now on the military budget? If we tried to dial that back, we would cause a huge economic collapse, because all of those dollars out there that are supporting so many communities around the country and probably around the world at this point. So we can't really do that. What we have to do is repurpose all of those military contractors towards something that's useful, that's not killing machines, but it's maybe exploring machines. So we start up a massive space program where the Lockheeds and Northrop Grummons and everybody else can still get basically the same amount of federal spending, but it's now being put towards exploration outside of our planet. So all of those people,
basically peaceful uses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and why wouldn't we have $500 billion a year going towards us protecting our planet from complete destruction and us becoming a spacefaring society? So we may as well do it.
Yes, and you have talked about that as the search for Planet B.
Yeah, right. I call it Planet B, and
Planet B, a plan B,
yeah,
to find Planet B.
That's it. Yeah, and it's the backup planet, and I don't think anything is. I don't think we'll ever find anything as nice as Earth. I mean, we're clearly genetically meshed with this planet, and damn, I like it here. This is a great place. So I don't want to leave, but I'm sure there are plenty of people that would want to explore. And I know when I was younger, I would have gladly hopped on a spaceship to other places. So let's let the next generations do that. Let's give them a worthy goal.
I was born in 1939.
Ah, yeah.
And strange as it may sound, when I grew up on science fiction. I started to read it when I was about 9 years old. So I've been reading science fiction now for 70 years.
Yeah.
A
So
long, long time.
that was kind of in the was the 40s and 50s. An awful lot of good science fiction, right? Heinlein, for example. The Heinlein was one of
Heinlein, right.
my
Okay.
favorites.
And Asimov.
Asimov, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Those guys. That was all formative for me. The whole Lazarus Long stories. I really enjoyed that. So
Yeah,
he was my favorite.
the cool green hills of Earth.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Specialization is for insects, not humans.
Indeed. Indeed. Okay, so we're through with your platform at this point. Uh, okay, I know that I hope that you win. First of all, I don't much care for Mark Sanford for obvious reasons, and among them, terrorism, and also, second of all, because I'd like somebody with a creative imagination who believes in MNT and wants to make things better for people to get into Congress. Okay, so I am in your corner completely. If that wasn't completely obvious from the content of this particular live stream.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, so I'd like to ask you if you have any final words that you'd like to convey to our people who have hung in there pretty good. We're still at the 25 people out there now, which ain't bad considering that we've been doing this for just about an hour and a half now.
Wow, hour and a half. Boy, I want a beer. That's the final words I want to say.
Okay, are you sure those are the only words you want to say?
That's it. I mean, visit my website if you want to go read more of the details of all this. I kind of gave you the overview on these things. Contributions to my campaign are useful. I don't think I'm going to need a whole lot of money to make this happen. But I still do need some money, so any contributions would be good. There's sort of a special surprise on the contribution page if you go out there and you see what the dollar amounts are out there. But it'd be nice if everybody did that. And let me just warn you all that I'm specifically focusing my campaign on younger people. I'm trying to essentially get out the vote for people who haven't seen a politician, a candidate who is any different. And I think, as you maybe have recognized, I'm a little different. And I'm trying to make it clear to the younger generations that I'm in their corner, and I want to make things better for them. So I'm specifically trying to get them out to vote. So there's some, I'm just going to say, there's some crazy shit out there that I'm putting out there. Some of my videos, in fact, I put one out today that's an awful lot of fun. And so you'll see some crazy stuff from me, but I hope I've also proven that I'm not really crazy. I'm a pretty deep thinker about this stuff.
Yes, I think you've shown us that. There are a couple of other things, okay, that I'd like to say. The first thing is you do have a lot of seniors in your district.
I do.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's one thing that you are offering, which should certainly be very, very attractive for seniors, and that's to raise Social Security to the point where it is equivalent to a living wage.
Yes.
For most people, and for many people, that would amount to more than a doubling of what they're getting now in Social Security. In other words, if you've also mentioned a living wage of roughly $20 an hour, which is something like, what is it, $44,000 per year.
Right.
And some people on Social Security are getting what? $7,200 a year or $10,000 a year, something like that. It would be a whole new world for them.
Yeah.
a whole new world for them. And I think older people have to hear this. And they have to hear that you're for a Medicare for All program as well,
All right.
which would greatly reduce the medical expenses that they have now.
Mm-hmm.
For a family of two, people in their 70s, it would probably save them $5,000 a year just that way.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
think they need to hear about that. And
Yep.
when they ask you how you're going to pay for it, you have the answers to that.
All right. Yep,
So,
exactly.
so I mean, you should be knocked down, drag out, popular with the old folks.
I unfortunately I can't reach them because all they watch is TV, and I don't have the hundreds of thousands of dollars required to get TV ads out there. But if I did, yeah, that'd be good. And
Yeah, but
so, so
can't you go to the senior centers and but
yeah,
talk to people there?
yep, and that's what I'm doing too. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
So
and that would spread by word of mouth.
yeah, I hope. Yeah,
Now, which is
but
actually more effective than
so
going through the mass media, I think.
yeah, yeah, I think it is for loyalty especially. Yeah.
Okay, and the second thing, okay, that I wanted to say is uh, we've got to get some people to Dimitri's website. Specifically, we should take it as a goal that we have to get 1,000 people to his website to read through his platform for themselves. Because you can't get the full impact of the platform unless you read these short pieces through and you think about them. It's very, very important. So we need to take that as a goal. We need to have, okay, we've certainly had more than 1,000 views on this particular website. And by the time we're finished, it'll get into the $2,000 or $3,000 range. Now, each of those views ought to produce a visit to Dimitri's website. So I'm calling for that. I think it's very important. Get out there and go. It's Cherny for Congress, correct?
Yep, journeyforcongress.us, or you can just Google Journey for Congress and it's going to come up.
Okay, so that's it. Let's get 1,000 people to the website.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, thank you, Dimitri.
Great,
Okay,
great conversation. Thanks for this opportunity.
Okay, I'm going to take you out of the broadcast now. I do want to say a couple of words to the folks, but before I leave. So thank you very much for coming. It was a great conversation. I enjoyed it very much, and I trust that our viewers did too. But we'll hear from them. We'll see the common thread, and we'll know.
Yeah, I'll look it through afterwards here.
Okay, good night. And I'll send you a bunch of things also, okay, just for convenience afterwards. Okay, good night. Okay, thanks again. Okay, so everybody, it's time for my parting message, and you probably know by heart, okay, what that is. Real Progressives has a Patreon account, and from time to time, we would very much appreciate a contribution. So, so please, if you're so moved, I'd like you to go to the Patreon page. Just go to patreon.com, okay, and look for us there. And secondly, I, Joe Firestone, also have a Patreon page, and I would appreciate a small contribution from time to time, okay, if you're able to afford it. Okay, only if you're able to afford it, though. So thank you very much for coming. And thank you very much for listening and watching. And thank you very much for commenting. And I hope you'll continue to share and to tell your friends, because I think we need a creative thinker like Dimitri in Congress very, very badly. And a creative thinker that knows MMT, I'd say, is worth his weight in gold. But I don't think gold is really worth very much compared to fiat currency any longer. I mean, it's worth a lot in fiat currency, but at the same time, I think the name of the game is fiat currency. So anyway, please remember that, and good night. And I will see you again on Thursday when I interview Lisa McCormick from New Jersey. And that one is going to be fun. I've seen Lisa, a couple of times before. But she's articulate, and she's running a tough race there. And that promises to be a very interesting live stream as well. So thank you again, and good night. And I'll see you at 9 on Thursday. So again, thanks a lot for coming, and good night.